Hello and welcome to Katrina's Creations. This is our Wednesday episode, and today we are going to talk about splicing patterns together. Now you may wonder, why would you ever need to splice anything? Well, sometimes when you're knitting something, you might be partway through the body of a sweater and realize there's a mistake quite a ways back, and you don't want to have to go back and rip everything out and start all over again. In the case that I'm going to be demonstrating today, I made a poncho and it was composed of two rectangles, and once I connected them together, I realized that it made the neckline just a little too snug. So I'm going to splice together and add a few rows just to make the rectangle a little bit longer so that the neckline itself is a little bit looser around the neck, because I'm apparently a little fluffier than what the pattern called for. So let's get started and I will show you how to do that. This is the side that has already been spliced, and you cannot even tell where I did it. I actually did it right along. I added about 1 inch to 1.5 inches right in here, and I spliced it right along this garter stitch edge at the side. So let me show you how I went about doing this before I cut it apart. The first thing I've done, because this pattern has plaids into it, as you can see, because this has a plaid pattern, as you can kind of see here, I have to work back these sections that created the plaid. So I took those back first, and I just took them back a little bit, and I did it over here as well, right here. So I've just worked these back so they're just laying loose. Now I put in what's called a lifeline. When you knit lace, you could do this. It just keeps so that if you ever had to make a mistake, your stitches aren't going to continue to unravel. So just using a contrasting yarn, and I just used a gold yarn here, I threaded it through the loops of my stitches. Now you do want to make sure that you're getting it through the actual loop and not in between the stitches. So let me move this up close so you can see. You want to make sure you pick up the actual loop. So you really want to make sure you're close, because it's very easy to go in between the stitch rather than through the loop of the stitch. So you go all the way across with that. So this yarn is sticking out on both ends all the way across. Then you're going to do the same thing, but attach a knitting needle as you go through it. I am using a circular needle, which is the easiest. And you can see that I have done the same here. Here you can see my lifeline right along here. And here you can see the cord of my circular needle. I'm going to cut right in between here. I've got about 2 stitches to spare right in between these 2 lifelines, and I'm going to cut right between the 2. I now have them apart. Now my lifeline here is keeping these stitches from unraveling. It also keeps these stitches live on this yarn so that when I go to pick them back up, I can just slide them right from the lifeline right back onto the knitting needle to splice them together. And the same applies for the yarn that is now, as you can see, sitting on the needles. Now I'm ready to attach my yarn and add another inch or so of knitting so that I can make this neckline a little bit looser. So we'll come back in a little bit and I'm going to add these stitches, and then we'll show you how to splice the whole thing back together again. I've now picked up all those live stitches and I've knitted across. I've added about 1.5 inches to the section. You can't even tell where I picked up the stitches. And I have carried my plaid stripes back up to the top. So now it comes time to join it back together to the original part of the piece. So let's get that started. First thing you're going to do is turn your work inside out. So the right side, which would be this side, is on the inside. Your wrong side, which would be here, will be facing out. My work is now inside out, and here is my working yarn right here. And behind it are the stitches that are still sitting on the waste yarn that's here. Now I could transfer these to another knitting needle and knit off of that, but you really don't need to. I'm going to be lining up stitch for stitch, and I'm going to go through the first stitch, and then I'm going to pick up the second stitch, which would be on here. I'm going to knit the 2 stitches together and pull them off, and then I will pull my thread or my waste yarn through. I'm going to do the second stitch. I'm going to go through the second stitch here, knitting through both of them. And pull them both off, both of the needle and the waste yarn. I'm going to do this stitch for stitch all the way across. And as I'm taking off stitch for stitch, I'm going to be binding off at the same time. So I'm going to do 2 stitches here, and then I will move the first stitch over the second stitch. So again, I'm going through the first stitch. I'm going through the stitch that is on the waste yarn. I'm going to slide the waste yarn off of it. Knit the 2 stitches together. And bind off. Do it one more time. I'm going to go through the center. I'm going to go through the first stitch, go through the second stitch that is on the waste yarn, pull the waste yarn out, knit through both stitches, and bind off. So we'll go all the way across and then take a look at it. We're now down to the last 2 stitches. So we're going to go through the front stitch, go through the back stitch, knit the 2 together, pass over, knit the last stitch, pick up the last stitch, pick up the last stitch on the back, knit the 2 together, bind off, and then we will tie off this last stitch. Let's turn it around and see what it looks like on the right side. And here you can see where we've spliced it together, and it doesn't show a bit. It was actually spliced on this side here. So there you go. We have added about 1.5 inches to 2 inches to the neckline of this poncho. So thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, please give me a thumbs up and check out my channel. I post videos every Saturday and usually every Wednesday. Thanks again for watching.